Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Konversation with me, Rick.
And me, Naeem.
And this fine young man, loosely termed.
Isn't he the hobo we found outside we gave some food to?
Yeah, hey, you want to do a show with us? This is Guru Jeffrey Binder.
Oh my god, you were going to say Reaper?
The Grim Reaper.
That was his ring name.
Now, the fascinating thing about this fellow here is he's one of the first, if you haven't noticed, white guys to win an international stick fighting tournament in the Philippines, and everybody
not get killed.
And everybody almost lost their mind. People, let's start with that because that is a crazy story. When I heard about this, how did all that come about?
Well, in 1988, Alfredo Bondelon had the first national stick fighting competition under Narafil auspices, and I fought Arlen Sanford in that. And every match I've ever had, I think I lost split decisions, and that was one of them.
Split decision.
So
this is in the Philippines.
No, this was in San Jose.
Okay.
U.S. Nationals. This was 1988. You want to know how it all got started?
Okay, so
he's telling a story. Goddammit, pay attention.
I got lost. Anyway, the fun part of the story for me was I took off. We had on, the weak half jacket and the helmet.
Right.
I took my jacket off. I had 2 bloody gashes on my arm.
Wow.
And Arlen was laughing at me. He says, "I got you good." Then he took his jacket off. He had 3 bloody gashes on his arm, and I said, "You outranked me."
The extra line.
But that was the day that he, Eric Naus, and Mark Denny huddled up over in the corner, and I stood about 3 feet away and listened to them as they said, "There's got to be another way to do this." So that was actually probably the inception of the Dog Brothers at that event.
Oh!
Yeah.
They were actually there. Huh? Did they show up? Did Dog Brothers show up for that?
There was no Dog Brothers.
Oh.
It was Mark Denny, Eric Naus, and Arlen Sanford saying, there's got to be another way to do this other than like the competition rules and so forth. So that was where the seed got planted. I think that was the first time that it got going like that. So it was kind of cool that I got to, stand on the sideline and watch that. That was the
crazy.
moment.
Wow.
Who knew it was going to become what it did?
Dude, I know. I mean, what it is now is just so crazy.
International. Yes.
Very, very impressive stuff. Those guys are crazy as fuck.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they have to have paramedics on hand all the time.
Well, my student, Nick Merchant, who just won the heavyweight title at the week half competition in the Philippines this last August.
Oh, wow.
He's actually now a member of the Dog Brothers tribe.
Wow.
Yeah, he's not a full dog yet, but he's done...
He's a pup.
Well, he actually did 10 fights at one event, which was unheard of. And so they actually brought him in.
Right.
You're supposed to, I guess, do 3 events before
Right.
It was only his second event, and they were so impressed they brought him in right then and there.
Yeah,
So he's at that first level of Dog Brother. I'm really proud of him
for
representing.
Did you ever fight one of the things? Did you ever do a Dog Brother fight?
No. Yeah. I never did a Dog Brother fight.
Dude.
Those guys are crazy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, the stuff that they do, very minimal gear.
Right.
If any.
Right.
And you can bring any weapon you want.
Correct.
It's not even sticks. It's just whatever you want to use.
No, I was shocked to find out there were some folks even doing bullwhips.
Right. I was like, what the hell? Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I've watched some of their videos. I'm like, holy shit, that's nuts.
I did not get to the bullwhip part.
Yeah. Now, I knew it was always around. I went with Tom Meadows, was a teammate of mine in Cebu in 1989.
Right.
And he was actually the first person to win a world championship under Dan Inosanto in any area of martial art, as far as I know. So he won the super heavyweight tournament, and then we went to watch one of the Dog Brothers gatherings at the park in Hermosa Beach. And Tom's a real bullwhip aficionado. As a matter of fact, he's the guy that created Larigo Idaga. He trained in whip under Momoy Cañete, Takoy Cañete, Dan Inosanto, So he had permissions from all of them to create his own system.
Wow.
So if you hear the term Ladi Goli Daga, it didn't exist until Tom created the term. So we went down to see a Dog Brothers gathering, and Ron Baliki was
Ron.
there, right?
Yeah.
You know Ron, Danny Osanto's son-in-law.
Yeah.
And he was off doing a bullwhip demo for somebody after the gathering was over. And I played with bullwhips throughout my life, but I was always standing there just trying to crack the
just trying
whip.
to get it.
You know, the stupid, ignorant thing.
Right.
And I watched Ron moving, and suddenly the light bulb went off over my head, and I said, that's FMA stick movement with the whip. And boom, all of a sudden it all made sense to me, and the
That's
pieces
crazy.
fell. So anyway, I was one of only 5 people in Tom's organization.
Right.
Anthony DeLongis was a member. He's the guy that taught Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer for their movie roles. Ron Liu, was in the organization.
Yeah.
And
We know Ron Liu's
You know
name.
Ron Liu.
Yeah.
Ron's
Jeez, that guy.
Ron's a badass.
Yep.
He's just most innocuous looking guy. He's amazing. And Mike Krivka on the East Coast. And he's a big kettlebell trainer and so forth. And so there were like about 5 of us in the organization. It really is a little bit defunct now, but yeah, the idea of bringing a whip to a stick fighting guy, Tom.
I mean, what is the opponent thinking? Goes, shit, you're going to fight me with that? What the fuck?
well, Tom Meadows, one of his sayings about it is, you can't beat it with a stick.
Right.
And it's kind of a pun on it, but
Right.
it's a reality check as well.
That's hilarious. Now, let me ask you this, because you've been in martial arts for quite a while. I mean, when did you get when did you first get the bug?
Oh, as a kid,
Yeah. Were you bullied?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was. That was a big inspiration. I used to say that I'd never lost a fight to less than 3 people, but I lost a few fights. Yeah, when you get chased by 5 or 6 people, the odds start to look bad.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So anyway, when I was about 11 years old,
11.
my dad...
He didn't grow to high school.
I know, right? He didn't grow up to high school.
Yeah, no, I was just a kid. One day I opened the door of my bedroom and there was a book on the floor that had just come out, I think 1966. It was Jay Gluck's book, Zen Combat.
Zen
It
combat.
was called Zen Combat. It's a classic. And I read that thing cover to cover. And it covered all these arts from Japan. So I knew, like 1966, I knew about Aikido. I knew about Ninjutsu. I knew who Maso Yama was.
Right, wow.
Gojin Yamaguchi. But then they also had a section in there about Filipino arts, little stuff in there about all this stuff. So my dad was a journalist, and we spent 3 months overseas, most of it in Asia.
Right.
And so Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and then down into the Philippines. And I actually got to see people training in stick fighting, various systems in Luneta Park on a
Yep,
Sunday
Luneta Park, yep.
when I was 11 years old.
That's
So
cool.
I remember the next day
And they're
we
still
drove
there, those same guys.
or the next generation or two, but anyway.
Rodel's over there.
Yeah. So and then the next day we drove past the park. And I, well, where are they? Oh, they only train on Sunday. I was so disappointed. But we went to Pangasinan Falls and took the you take the dugout up and then you come back down through the rapids. And there was a guy that had a little like palapa or hut there who was selling blades that he made.
Ooh.
And so my dad got a really, nice bolo, carabao handle. He said, pick one out for yourself. And just on instinct, I got a Bowie-sized knife. So now I have an Espada Daga set. My dad thought I was going to get another big one, big blade. But no, I just instinctively, I went for
For this
the Espada. No, it wasn't the smallest blade the guy
About
had.
this big.
But now, so now I've got a Espada Daga from when I was a kid in the Philippines. Anyway, but you were asking about the tournament, and you know how politics go in the Philippines.
Sadly.
So technically, I took second place at the first recap tournament. Technically,
Okay.
I lost a split decision to I can never remember his name. He's now an osteopath in London, England.
Yeah. That you remember, but not his name? Okay.
Yeah. I remember
He
that.
remembers the guy that beat him. Became something totally. He doesn't even fight. His name Bob?
Might have been. No, it wasn't Bob Breen. It was a tall guy.
Okay.
But anyway, they gave me, when I went up there, Junie and Kakwe Kenyeti were handing the trophies out. Second place was a Chris. I love Chris's. I was all happy. I'm going to get a Chris. They hand me a Campilon.
Wow.
And I'm like, wait a minute. It's the wrong trophy. This is first place. And they go, no, you won. They said the referee accidentally took 2 points away from you when he only should have taken 1 point. And that was the difference between you're losing the split decision and winning it.
Holy crap.
So officially in the standings, I took second place, but the trophy I still have at home is the first place trophy.
And you missed out on the Chris. God damn it.
I know.
I wish I would have got second.
I got a Chris today.
Yeah, I know. You came to get me for this. I saw that was behind your back. It was like,
I don't know if I should.
I was like, oh, no.
Well, you're not getting this one either. You're not getting this one either, so.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So we are at the VA Collaborative.
That's
first,
right.
And from the raffle, and then this from, was it Native? No, what's the name?
Was it from Hailey Campbell?
No,
that's not Hailey Campbell. This is from Melopedia.
Melopedia.
Yeah, Melopedia. Yes, exactly. Right. So it's a Dulo. It's a little neck release. Just
How
comes
cool
right
is
out.
that thing, though, right?
It is.
Very
And it's got this nice engraving on it.
Yeah.
Which he does by hand.
Yes,
Yeah,
he does.
actually does all the work.
All the tribal tattooing and stuff that he does.
I don't know how happy
You know, he
is.
lives out there by your neighborhood.
Yeah,
you know
Vallejo.
that, right?
He's in
He's
Vallejo,
across the
so
street from you, or the lake.
the Carquinez Straits,
Yeah,
yes.
right.
There you
I
go.
look out my
I
window.
call that a lake.
I can probably, the current goes this way, and then the tide changes and it goes that way.
You can tell what time of day it is.
Right.
So, how did that feel that you're the first American white guy to win in a Filipino tournament like that? That's got to be.
Well, there might have been some guys that went through the lower weight classes before me. That
Yeah,
won
but
it.
no, you're the guy.
It was pretty cool. I mean, I went over there not with the expectation of even winning. I just I wanted to see
Go beat on little Filipinos. No, I'm kidding.
the guys in my weight division weren't that little.
Yeah, I forget it's my weight class.
There are some big Filipino kids.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if we get to that story.
What was your weight class?
It was light heavyweight.
Okay.
Okay, so I weighed in at 189. I'm a little lighter than that now, but anyway, one of the things that was interesting is at one point, also I blanked with names. It was Kakwe's training partner, Vicente Corin,
Okay.
pulled me aside, and he said, "Your fighting style is different than anyone else in the tournament." Now, these old Filipino guys, they know the stuff. They can look at different schools and say, these guys do this, those guys do that. And my eye at that time, and probably even now, was not educated enough to discern all of those subtle details.
Right.
These guys were sharp. I mean, the cornermen in the tournaments were guys like Tatanio Strisimo and Benjamin Lima Lima.
Shit.
Wait,
Wow.
Illustrismo was one of them?
Yeah.
I mean, these were
Yeah.
Anyway,
Back in those days, it would have been
Holy
that.
crap.
right. So Vicente,
No wonder white guy won.
he calls me aside. And he says, your style's different than anyone else here. Who's your teacher? I said, Grandmaster Angel Caballas.
Oh,
He goes,
Bullshit.
who's that? We don't know who that is. Who was his teacher?
Right.
And I said, Felicissimo di Son. Ah,
So they knew it.
come sit with me. and he took me up onto the stage where we were looking down at the tournament, and he spent the next half hour pointing out all the different styles of the different fighters in there.
Wow.
But it was like the fact that I was doing Serrata. all these guys. I didn't know that, these guys all knew this song. I'm over there and I'm ignorant as anything. And they were picking up that they were seeing something that they weren't seeing from anyone else. And I was fighting with a short stick. Now, because I had the gloves on, I used a 24-inch stick.
Okay. And that must look really small in a glove like that because that.
Well, the 21-inch would look like
Right,
the duo in my hand, So, but anyway, so my thing was getting in close, and of course you couldn't just hit like repetitively 3 times the same thing. But Angel had a saying, 3 strikes and they don't fall. So we'd go 1, 2, 3. That's 3 different strikes, right? And I had people come up after my fights to go, we always tell you when you're in the ring because it sounds like a cash register because you're going ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching off in the face. Now, here's the thing about training is that things happen that are like unconscious or subliminal.
Right, it just pops out.
It just pops out.
Yep.
And in my first fight, I was fighting this burly Filipino. And at one point, he hesitates in front of me. He's holding his stick upright. There's a technique Angel had taught me, a disarm, that I've been teaching to my students for about 6 months before I went over there. And, people always say disarms don't work.
Right.
And I say, well, they certainly don't work if you don't train and practice them. And if you're looking for it and trying to get it, it's sort of too obvious.
Right.
And but if you're ever in a situation where, like, maybe you're grappling on a weapon or something, it's better to have an idea of what to do than to try and figure it out
Something
in that
as you
moment.
go, right.
So the guy standing in front of me, we're going at, and he hesitates for a second, and it was one of those moments like time suddenly stood still, the noise of the crowd dissipated, and I see my hand floating out into space. And I grabbed his stick and I twisted it. It came right out of his hand. And all of a sudden I went, oh, and I threw it on the ground. And the referee goes, point. Afterwards, the chief referee for the tournament came up to me and he said, all the grandmasters were laughing because none of them saw how I did it. And the thing was, if I'd held on to the stick, they would have said, oh, they were fighting over. But because I just went and threw it on the ground, they go, the other guy lost it. So I got the point.
Nice.
That's funny.
What I remember, and this is something in my training, when I first fought Arlen Sanford, I'd never worn a mask before, the face mask, the kneecap mask.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I'm fighting him, all I can see is the inside of my mask.
Yeah, right.
At one point he grabbed it and twisted, and I think I was looking out the ear hole. I was like,
This is not good.
no good. And I'm like, this guy knows how to fight to win.
Blind.
So anyway, training the couple of months I had, apparently I lost that fight, but then I got an invitation to join the U.S. team.
Wow.
I called Angel because I was so excited, and at first he says, no, I don't think it's a good idea. And we got off the phone, I thought about it for 5 minutes, and I called him back. I said, Angel, I'd really like to go. He says, okay then, you have my blessing.
Well, let me ask. Let's backtrack a little bit because Angel Cabales, who's long passed away. Everybody talks to him, but they don't really talk about him. I haven't heard a lot of stories. They just say, "Oh yeah, he does this. He does. Oh, he's really good at that. He dances. Right?" But you never hear about him. And it sounds like you know a little bit more about him.
Oh, nothing.
Can you tell me anything good?
Well,
what do you got?
I don't know anything compared to the guys that grew up with him in Stockton because they had access to him all the time at his home. They'd go drinking with him.
You don't hear these stories though. Have you ever noticed that? The only thing I know about him is he taught Serrata. We've talked to.
And he loves cognac.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we talked to. We talked to Carlito. We talked to Huron. But the stories are never really about Angel and stuff. It's always been kind of generic stuff.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'd go out there on Wednesdays and I would train with them all day, and then I could stay into the evening and go work out at the academy with the guys that were really good and try to hone what I was doing. So I'd usually get out there late in the morning or mid-morning, and we'd work out for a little bit. And then quite often he would take me to lunch, and the place he took me a few times was Gertie's Mabuhay restaurant, which was on Wednesdays. It was kind of an all-you-can-eat kind of a deal.
Oh, nice.
So Angel would make sure I was well fed. He wouldn't eat much.
Oh, he had a plan.
And then we would go work out. I'm like moving a molasses, and he's just out there like just having fun. Yeah.
Oh, wow. He just really set you up every time.
Yeah. No. He had a plan. He was a man with a plan.
You gotta love that, though. I mean, the stories that I've heard about him. I mean, he's that one mess that you always hear about. Everything is always good about him. You know.
Yeah.
You never hear anything negative about that instructor.
We will find him.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
No, I mean, anyone who's at the top of their profession,
Right.
Is always going to have naysayers and detractors. And, there are people out there that, have their opinions of Angel.
Right.
And and I'll say this about it, Angel was not a businessman. And some of the problems he had, say, within his organization or organizations that were formed by people who had trained with him,
Right.
And a lot of it was, Angel was a very humble person, but he was very proud of his art. And if you disrespected his art, you would see that fire come up in his eyes. I mean, that was like...
That was the thing that sits him off.
You knew where the line... Yes. You never wanted to see that if you were facing him. But there were people, they broke away and formed other organizations and so forth.
Yeah.
And, that was a lot of that was about the politics, and we know that's always endemic within not just martial arts, but in any human endeavor.
You said you teach. You have students currently, right? Do you actually... is it a brick and mortar place, or you just teach out of your house? You do it the old Filipino fashion way?
No, I mean, these days it's teaching in the park.
Yeah.
I only have 2 students now.
Okay.
One of them is Nick Merchant, who just won the heavyweight
Right.
WECAF, championship in the Philippines. And gentleman right there, Dennis.
Empathy man?
Dennis?
Empathy man, that's what we call it.
Yeah.
Empathy man.
Well, he basically, Serrata is part of what the training he has,
Right.
from, the organization that he's in, but it's not a Serrata-based organization. And he wanted to, learn a little more about the system. And what's the fun part for me is I'm blowing his mind because because he had no idea. Serrata is very simple on the surface.
Right.
We don't have a lot of techniques. We don't have a huge volume of drills. It's all designed to get you to be able to use the stuff practically in real time. But there's an incredible level of depth in there, and there's a lot of variations you can get off of it. And he's just really starting to see where all of it ties together and goes. Talk about the difference. Greg Henderson, who's a grandmaster now in Australia. I met him in '89 in the Philippines. He was the captain of the New Zealand team. He was a trainer for the New Zealand Special Forces, and then he trained with Momoy Kenyete, and then when Momoy passed away, he trained with Momoy's successor, Abner Pasa, before going out on his own. So he's a very talented guy.
Yeah, those are padres.
And he came through the U.S., through California. God, what year were the Rodney King riots? He was actually
92?
92, I think, yeah. He was in Berkeley at that time. And we got together and we worked out a few times. Then he went to England and came back and we worked out a little more. And he said that the Warrior system, which was under Abner Pasa, he said had 3,600 techniques, something like that, right? And I said, well, in Serrata, we've got a couple of dozen techniques. But what was interesting is anything he would do, I would replicate it. He'd go, and then I would do something. He'd go, oh, that's technique, 2017. Yeah. So the idea was they had taken their material and drawn out every possible contingency,
Wow.
to a certain
And,
degree, and categorized it that way. Whereas in Serrata, we boil everything down to the lowest common denominator,
Right.
so we understand the principle behind what we're doing, so that we can then build, whatever we need
Then you
off
go
the
wherever
principle.
you need to go.
Which means I could look at what he was doing and immediately understood it. Oh, you're doing this, there's a check, there's the counter. So we had a good time with that. Greg, don't get mad at me. I'm going to tell a story on you.
Here he goes, Greg.
Yeah. So he showed me a sparring drill they did called Palakau,
Okay.
which is free sparring, no gear, and the only rule was, no headshots. So if you can tap the shoulder, you could hit the head. Okay, it makes sense. And it was kind of like a half speed, half power kind of drill, and we played. And then he went to England. When he came back, he said, I have a confession to make to you. There's a particular move that he was doing, and every time he did it, I just tap him on the back between the shoulder blades. And when he came back, he said, you countered me every time, and no one else has ever countered me on that move. And I remember thinking to myself, well, after training with all those guys out in Stockton, that was kind of an easy thing for me to see. Yeah. So, anyway, so my whole reason for going to the Philippines was I wanted to see the state of it there. Angel used to say that, Eskrima was dead in the Philippines, and having been there as a kid and seen people training, I knew that wasn't true, that there was stuff going on. And,
But it is dead in the sense that a majority of the Filipinos don't do Filipino martial arts.
No, that's true.
You've seen that.
Taekwondo is more
Taekwondo,
popular.
Right? Taekwondo is their sport. As far as FMA is concerned over there, it wasn't until Prices really put it into the school system. But prior to that, nobody really cared or nobody wanted, because it was born from thugs and thieves, remember? Right?
Sadly, it was one of
that,
those things,
that history.
Oh, yeah.
So it really made it different. It wasn't like a brick and mortar place.
No.
You had to learn it from the families and whoever you can get in with, and that was it. And that's why it wasn't as, and I can understand why you would say it's kind of dead in the Philippines, because it really did. There's a big decline in it over. Out here, it's a popular thing.
Right. Of course, he hadn't been there since he was about 17 years old.
Right.
And so,
So much of his family moved to Stockton. The Philippines came here.
Right. Well, and after being in the Philippines, I would say that Stockton is more like the Philippines in terms of having that deep, that deep FMA culture embedded within the community.
We had Tim Hartman on here a couple of weeks back, and his take on it was like, get the F out, because it's really just martial arts, right?
Right.
But with the Filipino flavor slashed into there, but FMA. I know. Look at that face. And I want to hear your take on it, because
I remember when I met Sergio Emperado. I was partnered up with Sid Campbell and Bill Rodriguez, who was an 8th degree in Kajikembo. He was up out of the Vallejo area. And we were putting a school together. We were trying to put a school together. Too many chiefs, not enough Indians.
Right.
But it was called Pathways to the Orient, and it was located in the Diamond District of Oakland. And I went over there one day, and there's Sergio Emperado watching soap operas on TV. So, I spent the afternoon watching TV and then just chatting with him. And this was shortly after his father-in-law had passed away. And I'd actually read this in an interview in, I think, Black Belt Magazine. But he talked about it that day, what he said was, there are 1 million people around the world who are doing my art of Kajikembo, but none of them know, and none of them can do it the way I do it, because my timing comes from the Filipino martial arts, but my father-in-law is the person who taught it to me, and I was sworn to secrecy as long as he was alive. And now that he's passed away, I can tell it. So, there's a lot of Kajikembo people, after that happened, they were all going out and trying to find FMA people to bring it into what they did.
Well, that's what's been going on a lot lately. Yeah.
Aldo Casco says something similar too. He says everybody saw Kajikembo when I fought, but all I thought about was FMA. Watching my dad and my uncles play.
Yeah.
too funny.
So it was like, I think 1991. I remember going over to the Kajikemo School in Benicia. Emil Batista's place, and Dave Dukai, I think, sponsored it, and I did a seminar for them there.
Nice.
And I've done a few others.
Are you in the seminar circuit these days?
I've never been in a seminar circuit.
What?
In my entire life, I've done... I was going to say maybe 5. I've done DEA here once, and Arkansas was going to put me out more, but then... it sort of was catering more towards groups like mostly Kaji Kembo because they were bringing in all the students. I never got back on the floor there. He always was like, I'll get around to you. And,
Do you think that the stigma of being the first white guy to win in the Philippines thing, is that a big deal to you, or is that just something that...
I never thought about being like the first white guy or anything. I mean,
you know what I'm saying, right? Because that's something that's got to be
There were a number of
followed.
occasions. Well,
I think there's 2 parts to that question. Is one, did you feel anything about that title? And 2, have you felt it's affected you in some way, whether positive or negative, being recognized that way?
As being part of the inaugural tournament, I felt something about that.
Okay.
As being someone to go and represent Serrata over there, I felt something about that. I never thought about it, in terms of being white or being a racial thing. It's really only very recently that people have been that people have been pointing that element out to me. And it's like,
interesting.
And for me, it was like it just never really crossed my mind.
It was just somewhere you were at the time, and that was it. Right? For you, it was just, I part of the tournament.
Yeah. I represented my school.
And that was
I was part of the inaugural event. And that was it.
That was it.
Yeah. And I'll go back. When my father took me to the Philippines when I was a kid, he had an old friend of his was Carlos Romulos, who most people nowadays don't know who he was. He was General Romulos, who was the aide de camp under MacArthur. When MacArthur came ashore, said, "I've returned." That's Romulos.
Right next to him, right.
And then he became.
We knew his driver.
And then he became.
we knew his driver.
He became Secretary of Education in the Philippines, and actually was, I think, the second Secretary General of the United Nations.
Oh wow!
And he and my dad were friends. So we got to see, some really interesting stuff.
I
over there.
bet, Eddie.
Yeah.
Good God, man!
Wow.
So I've always kind of felt a connection into the Filipino community from all of this.
Did your dad, as a correspondent, you said
He was a journalist.
Journalist. Was it primarily in Asia that he operated in or wrote about?
No. My dad was a Chicago Republican, or an Illinois Republican. What that meant was he was a fiscal conservative. He was a social liberal.
Huh.
And he was the editor.
You sound a little hippie.
He was the publisher of the Sacramento Union before it was taken over by the Copley Press, which was the most right-wing daily newspaper in the country at the time, in a hostile takeover. Yeah. And what they said is, we want you out of the country for at least 3 months. We pay for it, but you go. That's how we wound up in Asia. Now the thing
That's cool, though.
Get rid of him so he doesn't stir anything up.
Well, that because he was popular in Sacramento. So my dad backed the first Asian American to run and get a seat on the city council in Sacramento.
Wow.
He was a big backer of the civil rights movement, and from the conservative point of view, he might be a Republican, but it wasn't popular. There was like a list I saw one time from the John Birch Society, and the 3 top, what they called pinko commies back then.
Yeah, I know the term.
Number 3, I think, was Katharine Hepburn. Number 2 was what's his name? Played against Sam. Humphrey Bogart.
There you go.
And my dad was number 1. so basically, he got run out of the country.
Right.
And some of the things. So he was meeting with both U.S. Embassy personnel, military personnel, because he had contacts like crazy through the military. And then
Was he in the service? before?
No, my dad was in an ROTC program in college, and then he got double pneumonia, which gave him blood clots in his legs.
Holy crap!
So he never was able to, pass physical after that. Yeah. But for instance, every year, like for Thanksgiving and holidays like that, living in Sacramento, we would always have like servicemen from like the local Army or Air Force bases as guests in our home for dinner.
And some of them became officers.
Well, and then they would have. Then my parents loved to throw cocktail parties, and that's where the colonels and generals would show up.
Ah, okay.
So
for the sauce, they came for the sauce.
Oh yeah. My dad got to do a trip on the USS Carl Vinson.
Okay.
And stuff.
Cool, yeah.
He was taken on a ride on a submarine out of Pearl Harbor. Well, let's put it this way. My dad was a friend of Eisenhower.